Hello and welcome to the Pug City Podcast. What's a Pug City Pod? Well,
Something like that. It's close enough.
yeah, that'll do. As a extension to the Park Bites. Today, I'm James and I'm with,
Simon.
and we are here to talk to you specifically today about mental health.
Yeah, I mean, mental health is it's a big and it's a very important subject, and it's something that isn't probably talked about enough. So we just want to have a friendly chat, really, not going into all the legislation and the whys and the whos, but more about just getting it out into the open and that people can feel relaxed talking about mental health.
Yeah, it's got a huge stigma attached to it, really, isn't it? Typically, for years it's been seen as the miserable git in the corner, or the
sometimes me.
Yeah, well, sometimes me as well, both. But being that Debbie Downer, I've heard it called many different things at a point. But I guess it's how what we're going to do about it in that side of things, and it's. I guess the first part is identifying it, isn't it? Really?
Exactly, it's the triggers, and they're not always obvious, but they're usually several of them. Which, if somebody's not feeling themselves, or they're not talking, or they're just, as you said, they're hiding away in a corner, are they persistently coming in late? Is there a reason for that? Those kind of things. It's those very small triggers that you've got to kind of watch out for. And normally, your colleagues are in a good place to be able to see that because they do notice changes in people.
Well, it is funny you say that because typically most people spend more time with their work colleagues than they do with their loved ones.
That's right.
And so yeah, you can always spot it when somebody is off, and some of it might be as simple as just having a bad weekend, being a bit grumpy, side, not getting enough sleep. Some of it could be, it could be a rough time in their personal lives. These are all effects. But the other thing is, it might be also work related. Is the individual perhaps a bit stressed? And these are all triggers that you've kind of got to spot. And I'd love to tell you that there's a perfect example and it affects everybody in the same way, but it doesn't because we're all different people.
Yeah.
And some people will shut down, some people will overcompensate. And yeah, like you say, so it might lead to somebody being being absent more.
Yeah.
It can lead to a loss in personal hygiene, and that's an interesting subject because having a conversation with somebody, you're not looking after yourself at the moment. It might be a bit rough from a shaving perspective, isn't it? Or there might be like a smell or odor, and that's a difficult conversation itself.
I've been subjected to that before in business, and it's not an easy conversation to have. Yeah. But you're right, it could be a trigger. If somebody's whole demeanour changes, there's normally a reason for that. It's not somebody just wakes up one day and suddenly thinks, I don't give a stuff anymore.
Yeah.
There's something going on in their life which is a fundamental change. And quite often it is a mental thing, which leads to a physical thing, hence the no longer looking after your appearance anymore.
I mean, there are a number of statistical studies out there that does reflect happy workers being more productive.
Yeah.
Which in turn, we want people to be not only productive but alert and functioning for when they're in the workplace. Because certainly in our side of the industry, from a health and safety perspective, we don't want people getting hurt. And obviously, somebody who doesn't really care for themselves anymore is fundamentally going to be more likely to take risks, take shortcuts because they don't care, or certainly omit certain steps of a process. So, some of the things that we need to obviously, once we've identified these points, is actually, well, what can we do to help somebody?
Correct.
And there's quite a lot of different things that you can do, but a good starting point for a business is what do you have in place? Do you have a policy in relation to mental health?
Mm-hmm.
Does your health and safety also cover the mental aspect? Because that is part of the framework, and it is something that is until I would say the last 10 years has been quite often omitted as a whole. And I think COVID really did shine a light on it. And I know I use the dreaded COVID word. And we like to think that we're way past it, but obviously there are a lot of lingering things.
No, it's actually a really good point, is COVID, because people suddenly put into a forum and a world and an environment they'd never faced before. And there was that bit of isolation, but people were having to stay home. They're no longer talking to colleagues anymore. People were then permanently working from home. There was all the isolation out in supermarkets. We all know what happened in COVID, but it definitely weighed on people's minds as well as the physical side of things.
Well, this is the other side of things. So how do we spot mental health issues in people working from home?
Yeah.
You know, you don't physically see them as much.
So it's all about good communication, making sure you speak to these people. Don't just leave them alone. Treat them a bit like a lone worker. You need to have something in place where you regular check in, whether it's just text messaging or the occasional phone call, whatever it is, but you need to have something in place.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example of certainly a way to do things. It's without being too corny, you know, I grew up watching the 80s, 90s television, and so I distinctly remember the old BT advert from Bob Hoskins where he used to say, "It's good to talk."
So yeah,
and that is so true, because if you're not talking to people, how are you going to find these bits out? Apart from the odd glance, and people are pretty good potentially at hiding demeanours. There's a taboo and almost like a horrible stigma with mental health issues, whether it be anxiety, stress, depression. It manifests in so many different forms, shapes, and sizes, and sometimes people are very good at masking these points, and so with very limited direct conversation about it, it is very hard to sometimes tell. And when the problem is in the language that we use, we'll walk past and go, "Oh, you're all right," and we treat that as a greeting, and people don't answer that as a actual question. So, in order to get that, you've almost got to ask.
You've got to pry a little, haven't you?
Yeah, you've either got to reshape it or ask it again directly and lean into that. Say, actually, no, oh, you're all right, and put a little bit more emphasis on it, and actually be willing to listen to the answer. Because this is another issue that I see quite common from a mental health thing is people say the question, but they don't necessarily listen to what the answer is coming from. And when you have somebody who's got an issue with this, and they're finally having enough vulnerability to break down and talk about the issue, is you need to be able to listen to that issue. Now, are you going to be able to solve all their problems overnight? Probably not, and that side of things. But the age-old expression, a problem shared is a problem halved. And you can then use the tools and bits available, whether it might be through an employee assistance program, to signpost people.
Yeah.
Because we're not instant shrinks overnight. We're not psychiatrists to sit there and talk through and analyse people. No, we're far from that. But actually having that pair of ears to listen and perhaps offer a different perspective might be enough to help cause a shift.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is there are some great tools out there now. Probably since COVID, it's become a lot more prevalent, where many companies now have like a helpline.
Yeah.
So if you don't feel like you can talk to your colleagues, you can call this number. It's all anonymous or whatever. You can speak to a professional. There's specific health plans which companies allow you to use this information. And also now, as well as the standard first aid course we offer, there's like a mental health first aid course. So people can actually get trained to sort of see the signs a bit more and have an idea of maybe how to talk to somebody, but also they know where to guide somebody. So they're not trained as a professional psychiatrist or, a doctor, but they're sort of given the tools to be able to say, actually, have you thought of speaking to these people or whatever?
Yeah.
So there are avenues these can go to. They don't have to suffer in silence.
Yeah, I think that's a great point thing to raise. I mean, a few years ago I did go on the course, and the course itself is fantastic. It really does open your eyes to a lot of different aspects. I mean, personally, I was quite naive in even acknowledging things like eating disorders being part of the mental health issue, and it does it does put things into a lot of perspective. And like I said earlier, it's not about fixing the problems; it's about knowing where the support is and signposting. It's quite a specialist field, but it is about helping people to find the right avenue to go down. And the mental health first aid course is great for any organisation that wants to start putting a foothold down on actually tackling the mental health problem. the problem with mental health is it is not physically visible apart from those direct symptoms. So you could have somebody who's showing no symptoms at all and actually been going through a lot as a whole. But I always find, and the problem is it's also perspective based. So you've got some people who, they could have 100 things go wrong for them, and typically they'll be fine, and and then the next day one little thing goes, and the world's ended, and
it's a trigger point.
Yeah, and those trigger points vary, and the example I always use is in terms of people's tolerance is you have a variable sized bucket on that side, and one day that bucket might be a swimming pool. And so somebody coming in and they can keep chucking it in, and you'll never fill up the swimming pool.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other days where you turn up and there's a shot glass, and the first one goes in and it's overflowing at that point. Yeah. And we all, I think we all get stressed to a certain degree, and
it's finding that breaking point.
Yeah.
And I think every single person has one. And as you say, some people are a bit more tolerable than others, where the smallest of things can really send somebody over the edge, whereas other people can. You can sort of take loads before you finally go snap. So, and it's finding a happy medium, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because people are individuals.
I suppose just to bring this into a relevant work-based context, because obviously that's the way where we're aiming it. Is obviously as a business, you have to protect the business from all. You have to provide a safe place of work, and obviously the obvious ones are physical. Whether it be a barrier or a guard, or a particular set of working instructions or a setup that works to keep somebody safe. The thing from the mental health side perspective, as soon as you've spotted those triggers, you are almost automatically enabled to act, because that is your first trigger point to say, oh, we've got a problem, what are we doing about it? Because if we look at things on the worst case scenario from a case perspective, I think there's a pretty famous case to do. I don't know if I should throw them under the bus, but I think it's Nottinghamshire Council, or one of the county councils down there, where they had a case where a individual worker got stressed. They went off, came back to work, and then went back into the same job and got stressed again in the same way, and they got the book thrown at them. Because they'd made no reasonable adjustments for the individual.
Okay.
And there's plenty of ways from a reasonable adjustments view, because from a business owner or a manager side, it might be a conversation about work hours, the flexibility. There's new employment law. Please see the Park City webinars, for some good advice on that one. And whether it be reasonable adjustments, whether it be a little bit more flexibility, whether it be improving facilities around it, whether it be signposting people to an employment assistance program. There's so many things that you can do, and when you've got somebody who is in quite quite far down the road on the stress part, we could be looking at a occupational health referral. Because we need to look at things from two different ways. We need to protect the individual, and we also need to protect the company. And so it's not about throwing somebody out the door and saying, oh, off we go, because at the end of the day that person's mental health is not going to improve. So we do want to help them, and at the same time the company wants a effective and happy employee, because like I say, it is important that we are looking after individuals.
Absolutely, it's all about finding the fundamental reasons why is the person stressed. So we do risk assessments all the time within business, whether it's risk assessing a task like manual handling or a particular piece of machinery. But we can also risk assess the actual environment that a person works in. So like you say, I mean, if people are constantly working extendable hours, that could cause stress. People working unsociable hours, does that fit in with the person's lifestyle? Are they sticking to a specific job which is for too many hours? Could the company look at maybe like a rotation where people get switched around? There's lots of things which can be done, which could all be found within a risk assessment. Yeah. And it's just down to the company understanding their business or using professionals such as ourselves to go in and risk assess these things. And we can look at ways and improvements which will help the employer and specifically the employees.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So I think a takeaway from this is, double check your risk assessments. Do you have stress, on there? Especially if you've got a job that has time pressures as well. or and quite often a lot of these a lot of the stress parts are sometimes self-imposed.
Absolutely.
Because people love to, I must get this job done by this point. And when you stop and you ask them why they must get the job done, well, it's because they want to sit down and have a rest, so they rush things, and it's kind of
We appreciate companies have targets and they've got KPIs and they have to get products out the door, but it has to be done in a safe manner. And we find in our position, often accidents happen because people cut corners because they have to get something out on time, and it doesn't fit in with the business and the safe aspects. And you do have to find that happy medium. Stress is exactly the same as a physical injury in that respect.
And just pull back to a point that you made about working extra hours and overtime. If you've got a team that's consistently working overtime, that to me is screaming: are you resourced sufficiently?
Correct,
do you have enough people in your normal hours, or enough space and ability at that point? Because it might not be the people that be the issue. It might be the environment as well. So it is important to engage with your staff and have clear communication, because if you do have the conversations and they do put the trust in you, you've got the honest answers there. And from that point, if you've got the information, as long as you're doing something with it, whether it will be improving the scenario, engaging with the staff, finding those like trigger and release points, you'll find that actually it won't become an issue. But the problem is when you want to bury your head in the sand, that isn't going to do anybody any good. It's not going to do the individual who's suffering, and from a business perspective, that's going to really expose yourselves to potentially a claim. And claims aren't cheap in those circles. Do say it quite often. Health and safety is viewed as a non-profit generating cost to a business, but it saves you so much money in that side of things, because it keeps your employees healthy and it keeps the business running. And if you avoid the fines and you avoid tribunal costs, then it is money worth spending.
Absolutely.
And certainly, if you're having to replace staff, that's not cheap either. Whether it be recruitment costs, or whether it be training costs. If you want a good quality staff member, you've got to train them, and that costs a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just pulling it back round to the original subject about the mental health, it's something that you can't ignore.
Not at all, no.
No. So
we've got to look for the triggers. We've got to look out for the staff, and that's the fundamental of what people need to do with mental health.
Yep. So, some takeaways: consider the options in relation to a mental health first aider mental health first aider within your workplace. Helplines, they're all there. Check your risk assessment. Have you thought about stress? And simply just do your best to engage with staff. Talk to your staff on that side. It is the most effective form of communication, ideally in a face-to-face way. And we know it's not the most comfortable conversation with some people, but it's the way that you can see the reactions, the tone, and have that full element of the communication. And most importantly, be safe and continue to look after your staff.
Yeah, absolutely.